They pushed a thick envelope toward me. "Va. This includes your severance," Marcus said, "and a clause of mutual non-disparagement. My name is Lisa Morrigan. I'm 45 years old, and for the past 12 years I served as the Chief Information Officer at Skyline Digital Bank. They used to call me the spine of the system, quiet, invisible, but essential. I built the bank's digital infrastructure from the ground up, the firewalls, the encrypted vaults, the real-time fraud detection layers. When I joined, we were just a startup with an overconfident CEO and 5 overworked engineers. Now, we were a top 3 player in the digital banking market, managing billions in virtual transactions daily. I didn't come from the Ivy Leagues. I didn't flash credentials or chase headlines. What I had was intuition, real-world pattern recognition, the kind that didn't come from textbooks. While others talked about innovation, I made systems bulletproof. I didn't build for speed or appearance. I built for survival. For a long time, that was enough. Then, the conversations began to change. The board wanted data monetization. The term sounded harmless, futuristic even. But I knew what it meant: slicing, packaging, and selling user data like retail stock. Under the veneer of digital transformation, they were opening the gates to external vendors, cloud marketplaces, third-party analytics platforms. I raised concerns, not loud, just clearly. "Once you externalize control," I said during one board meeting, "you relinquish accountability. If our data leaks, it won't be the vendor on the front page. It'll be Skyline." The room went quiet. A few exchanged glances. The head of strategy gave me a tight-lipped smile. The kind that said, "You just don't get it, do you?" I did get it. That was the problem. They saw me as an obstacle, someone clinging to obsolete ethics in a new world of aggressive growth. Internally, things shifted. I was left out of strategic meetings. My budgets were trimmed. A consultant, young, flashy, jargon-heavy, was brought in to help modernize our stack. I let it happen, not because I gave up, but because I wanted to see how far they'd go. By Q2 of last year, they presented a new plan to outsource our entire user data architecture to a Silicon Valley firm with a sleek name and zero transparency. The deal was practically signed when they finally brought me in for a discussion. "We need alignment, Lisa," the COO told me. "I'm aligned with the users who trust us, not to sell them off." It was the wrong answer. 2 weeks later, I was called into a meeting. HR was there, legal too. They used polite phrases: restructuring, realignment, not a reflection of your contributions. But beneath the sugarcoating, the message was clear: "We're done with you." I didn't yell, I didn't plead, but I didn't go quietly either. "You're making a mistake," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "Not because you're letting me go, but because you think systems run on code. They don't. They run on context, and none of you have it." I walked out with my access revoked and my reputation intact, at least for the moment. What they didn't know was that while I had documented every system protocol, I had never shared the logic trees I personally designed, logic that made our security adaptive, responsive, alive. They thought I was dispensable. They thought wrong. The official subject line was Strategic Alignment Briefing, that's what they called it. I knew better the moment I saw the invite. Monday morning, 9:00 a.m., private meeting room, only 4 names on the list: COO, General Counsel, HR Director, and me. They didn't even bother pretending it was routine. I arrived 10 minutes early, not because I was eager, but because I'd already made peace with what was about to happen. A woman who spent her life predicting system failures could hardly miss the signs of a human one. Inside the room, everything was too polished. The blinds were drawn, the lights set just bright enough to feel clinical. A pitcher of water, untouched. A box of tissues, conspicuously placed at arm's reach. Marcus Dwyer, our COO, looked up from a leather folder. "Lisa, thanks for coming." I didn't respond. Just sat down, adjusted my cufflinks, habit from better days, and waited. He launched into it with corporate grace. "As you know, Skyline is entering a critical phase of expansion. We're evolving toward a more data-integrated, customer-centric strategy." I raised an eyebrow. "So, you've decided to sell the soul of the company?" He faltered, just a second, then composed himself. "The board has decided to move in a new direction. It's not a reflection of your contributions, which have been invaluable." "Invaluable," I repeated, "but not valuable enough to keep." HR slid a thick envelope toward me. "This includes your severance terms, continuation of benefits, and our mutual expectations regarding confidentiality." I didn't touch it. "And the real reason?" I asked. Marcus glanced at legal, then back to me. "You've made it difficult to move forward with key partnerships. Your concerns about vendor risk and data security have been well documented." "You mean I said no, out loud, to the wrong people?" He didn't deny it. I leaned forward. "You're outsourcing sensitive infrastructure to a third-party vendor whose audit history includes 3 unresolved breaches. You're gambling with customer trust for a Q4 spike." Marcus's tone cooled. "Lisa, this isn't personal." "But it is," I interrupted. "Because I'm the one who'll be blamed when your shortcut becomes tomorrow's headline." He said nothing. "You don't want a CIO, you want a mascot in a blazer, someone to stand beside bad decisions and smile." The air in the room turned heavier. HR looked down. Legal kept a neutral expression. "You're firing me for doing my job," I said quietly. Marcus shifted. "Let's not frame it that way. We simply..." "Training is your business. Integrity is mine." I stood up slowly. "I won't fight this. But don't mistake my silence for submission." He cleared his throat. "If you're implying any threat..." "I don't threaten, Marcus. I design systems, and this one," I nodded toward the building, "was never built for shortcuts." I left without taking the envelope. As I passed through the glass corridor toward the exit, I noticed how quiet everything had become. Heads turned away, averted eyes. The same people I'd worked beside for over a decade now couldn't meet my gaze. Perhaps they thought it was shame. Maybe guilt. It didn't matter. My badge buzzed red at the security gate. I handed it to the guard, who didn't say a word. That night, I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked in years, fragments of a life too full of servers and firewalls to make room for anything else. The first emotion wasn't sadness, or even anger. It was clarity, cold surgical clarity. They hadn't removed me because I was wrong. They removed me because I refused to pretend they were right. And in that moment, I realized something with absolute certainty. They'd made a critical error, not just in judgment, but in architecture. They thought systems ran on code. They were wrong. They run on context, and none of them had it anymore. I heard they filled my position within 4 days. The new CIO was a man named Derek Langston, 37, MBA, buzzword enthusiast. His LinkedIn read like a pitch deck. Transformational leader in digital innovation, scaled architecture with a future-first mindset. No mention of actual code. No mention of security protocols. Just photos of him speaking at tech summits, holding a microphone like a rock star. I knew his type, all theory, no blood under the fingernails. The transition team reached out once. They asked for clarification on a few legacy frameworks. I gave them the documentation, nothing more. The true architecture, the interlocks, the reactive buffers, the threat containment logic, I hadn't written those in any manual. Not because I was hiding anything, because no one ever asked. They assumed systems were like IKEA furniture. Follow the instructions and it works. But mine had evolved. They were alive, layered with behavioral heuristics, defensive logic loops, and fail-safe redundancies that only someone who understood the why behind the code could ever maintain. Within 3 weeks, the alerts started. A former analyst texted me anonymously, "We're getting weird latency spikes on login verification. Compliance Suite keeps timing out." I didn't reply, but I watched. Their firewall patches were applied incorrectly, load balancers over-allocated, the behavioral risk engine, once my crown jewel, was disabled after it flagged too many false positives. Translation: it worked too well for people who didn't understand it. An executive posted on LinkedIn, proud to announce our full data migration to Hypercloud TM was successful. The future is now. I closed the app. The future they were celebrating was a minefield with no map. I spent my mornings on the couch, coffee going cold, staring at job alerts I didn't open. My inbox filled with subscription emails I never unsubscribed from. My hands itched to debug something, anything, but I had nothing left to fix. My name vanished from the company's org chart. Press releases called Derek a visionary replacement. Articles praised Skyline's aggressive pivot toward platform agility. And yet, every week, I got another whisper. They're locking down parts of the system they don't understand. 2 junior analysts quit, said the structure was a mess. Client complaints about app security just doubled. Still, I said nothing. What would I even say? That I had warned them? That they were in over their heads? No one wants to hear Cassandra after the temple starts burning. They just want her to shut up and go away. And so I did. I disabled all my alerts, logged out of my last admin dashboard, and let the silence take over. The breach didn't begin with an explosion. It started with a flicker, a few milliseconds of delay in the login interface, a spike in failed MFA tokens, a system log that didn't match the expected checksum, small things, almost nothing. But systems like the one I built don't fail loudly. They erode, layer by layer, when misunderstood hands tinker with living code like it's static architecture. On day 1, Skyline's public statement called it a temporary systems hiccup, affecting a limited number of users. On day 2, customers began posting screenshots, zeroed out balances, locked accounts, unverified transactions. By day 3, a well-known tech blogger published leaked firewall logs, confirming multiple unauthorized data pulls routed through an API that should have been restricted at the behavioral layer. They disabled that layer, of course. A choice made by someone who wanted fewer false positives. By the end of the week, it was undeniable. Skyline Digital Bank had suffered one of the largest data breaches in U.S. fintech history. The reports came fast. Names, social security numbers, bank statements, facial recognition templates, metadata that could map a person's financial identity for over a decade. The hackers hadn't just stolen. They had mapped, categorized, indexed, and sold. I read the headlines with a strange mix of grief and detachment, like watching a funeral from behind soundproof glass. It was the burial of everything I had built. An engineer I once mentored sent me a message through a private channel. They turned off the anomaly engine, said it was too sensitive. The override let the exfiltration slip past every flag. I said nothing. She followed up. We tried to stop it. We couldn't. I'm sorry. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. But I was tired. Then came the post-mortem leaks. Someone inside had shared a section of the internal report with the media. The compromised logic originated in a legacy module authored under the leadership of CIO L. Morgan. Mitigation was limited due to lack of continuity in system logic transfer. I knew what that meant. They were naming me, carefully but publicly. They weren't saying I did it. They were saying I made it possible. That I left behind a trap door. Or worse, a poison pill. At first it was just whispers. A few Reddit threads, a vague tweet from a cybersecurity account with 80K followers. Rumor has it the Skyline breach was an inside job. Sabotage? Or just genius turned bitter? Then it reached mainstream. A podcast, titled Digital Judas, did an entire segment on the breach. One guest suggested, not subtly, that I may have deliberately left a system too complex to be maintained, knowing what would happen if she were removed. Others followed. The term Morrigan method began circulating online not as a compliment but as a warning. If your CIO designs a system only they can understand, you don't have security, you have a hostage situation. Job inquiries stopped. Interviews were canceled with no explanation. One recruiter finally admitted, off the record, "You're brilliant, Lisa. But nobody wants to hire the person the industry thinks might have tanked $1 billion bank. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter anymore." I wasn't blacklisted. I was shadow banned from the industry I gave my life to. I tried, once, to write a rebuttal. I opened a document titled, "What Really Happened?" I wrote the date of the breach, the conditions I warned against, the exact line of code I'd designed to stop this, and the email trail proving I'd begged them not to bypass it. Then I deleted it, because nothing kills truth faster than desperation. And because I understood now, they didn't need proof. They only needed doubt. Doubt was enough to discredit, enough to isolate, enough to erase. So I did what I knew best. I shut down the ports. I deleted my LinkedIn, my GitHub, my public trail. Let them whisper. Let them fear what I might have done. It would hurt less than watching them use my silence as evidence of guilt. I stopped answering messages, I stopped updating my resume, I stopped trying to explain myself. Because the truth is, I didn't sabotage them. I just didn't save them from themselves. And in this world, that's enough to make you the villain. The story should have ended there. I'd been erased, condemned by implication, and left to rot in silence. But silence, I learned, is rarely empty. Sometimes it echoes. The first ripple came from an unlikely place, a junior systems analyst I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. He found me through a secure Proton mail. "You don't know me well." I was in the 2021 backend security audit team. I saved some files, meeting transcripts, notes where you warned them. I didn't mean to, it was just habit. "If you ever want them, I'll send." I didn't respond, but I kept the message. A week later, a second message appeared, this time from someone I knew well. Jordan, one of my former staff engineers, now working at a small cloud security firm. "I know what they're saying. I also know it's not true. I've started documenting everything I remember, including the times you flagged the exact API structure that got exploited. You weren't wrong, Lisa. They just wanted you to be quiet." Still, I said nothing. But something had started to shift. Then came the article, published on a small but respected independent tech site, written by a journalist I vaguely remembered from a panel years ago. The headline was simple: "The breach that was predicted, why Skyline's collapse was no accident." She hadn't contacted me. She didn't need to. Everything in her piece was reconstructed from open-source material, archived reports, LinkedIn posts, even bits of public company filings. But buried in the article was something chillingly precise. Internal emails from 2023 show that Skyline's former CIO issued multiple warnings about data migration risks. Her exact words, "This architecture will fail under automated scraping and session spoofing," match the method used in the January breach. I stared at that line for almost an hour. I had written that sentence in a private email 2 years ago. Someone had kept it and passed it along. I didn't ask who. The article went viral, not mainstream viral, but viral in the circles that mattered. Security forums, risk compliance groups, whistleblower communities, even a few corporate Slack leaks. Some responses were skeptical. This just feels like revisionist hero worship. Others, however, were direct. We were wrong about her. They didn't fire a threat, they fired the firewall. I didn't post. I didn't comment. But I watched. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. The next move didn't come from me either. A new podcast called Digital Conscience picked up the story. They did a full episode titled The Lisa Question. They didn't frame me as a martyr or a villain. They just asked, what happens when the person who said, "Don't do this," gets fired? And then the exact thing happens? Is silence complicity or self-defense? For the first time, the conversation wasn't about blame. It was about consequence. I began receiving inquiries again. But they weren't job offers. They were invitations to speak at university panels, to consult on nonprofit cyber ethics initiatives, to contribute anonymously to academic papers on infrastructure integrity. I turned down most of them. I wasn't ready. And truthfully, I wasn't interested in being rehabilitated. I wasn't trying to come back. I was trying to let go. But then something strange happened. I started writing again. Not a tell-all. Not a manifesto. Just quiet, precise articles under a pseudonym. Safer Echo. Topics like reactive security systems vs. reactive leadership, the cost of ignoring internal objections, the false economy of outsourced integrity. I posted them on obscure forums, no credentials, no identity. And yet, they gained traction. People debated them, quoted them, shared them, even cited them in training programs. It wasn't vindication. It was something deeper. Relevance. On my terms. One morning, I received an encrypted message. No name attached. Just 2 lines. I used to think you were paranoid. Now I teach your model to our interns. You were right. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I hadn't taken revenge. I hadn't exposed anyone, sued anyone, or named names. I had simply told the truth in pieces through others. And in doing so, the narrative shifted. Not loudly, not completely, but enough. Skyline never issued a retraction, no apology, no correction. But the silence, this time, wasn't mine. It was theirs. And it was deafening. The story should have ended with me, out of a job, out of the industry, out of the narrative. But systems, like memories, are never fully erased. Sometimes they echo. The first message came in on a gray morning. I had no meetings, no expectations, just my usual routine: make coffee, scroll past the world. Then a secure email hit my inbox. You probably don't remember me. I was one of the junior analysts on the 2021 back-end audit team. I have notes. Your notes, actually. Meeting logs. Screenshots of internal chat where you warned them specifically about the escalation pathway they ignored. I saved them, just in case. Let me know if you want them. No pressure. I stared at the email, unsure if it was hope or bait. I didn't respond. 2 days later, another message. This time from Jordan. I remembered Jordan well. Sharp, loyal, the kind of engineer who understood that code was never neutral. I don't care what they say. You were right. I pulled my backup drives. I still have the flagged documents from your reviews. The ones about anomaly behavior models, the ones they buried. If you ever want to set the record straight, I'll stand by it. I still said nothing. But something inside me twitched. Not vengeance. Recognition? Then came the article. Not from a major outlet, not from the screaming tech headlines. It was buried on a mid-level independent blog run by a cybersecurity reporter who had quietly built a reputation for accuracy over popularity. The headline was simple: "The breach that was predicted, why Skyline's collapse was no accident." She didn't reach out. She didn't need to. Everything she wrote was already there, hidden in public filings, buried in archived internal memos, parsed from employees who clearly didn't want to be identified. But one detail caught my breath. In a 2023 internal memo reviewed by our team, former CIO Lisa Morgan wrote, and I quote, "If you deactivate the adaptive logic tree, Skyline will be blind to slow-velocity breaches disguised as internal traffic." That exact method was used in the January hack. That memo had never been published, never shared externally. Someone saved it, someone leaked it, and now it was out there. I read the article twice, then again. Not because I doubted it, but because I never imagined someone else would put the words back in my mouth after the world had stolen my voice. The ripple was slow at first. A few shares, niche cyber forums reposting the link, then a thread on InfoSec Exchange with 200 comments dissecting the breach. Then bigger names started quoting it: CISOs, risk analysts, academics, even a few vendors. And then someone from inside Skyline, anonymously of course, posted, "We warned the board the firewall model was working. They thought it was over-engineered. They wanted simple, fast, clean. So they broke it." The thread exploded. But it wasn't just online noise anymore. I began receiving encrypted inquiries from investigative teams. Not about me exactly, but about the decisions made after I left, about procurement inconsistencies, about the outsourcing contract no one could fully trace, about how Skyline justified silencing its security objections. Some of the same executives who had forced me out were now being named in ethics probes. No headlines yet, but the ground beneath them had begun to tremble. Still, I didn't speak. Instead, I started writing. Not about Skyline, not about the breach, but about the things no one else wanted to talk about: ethical architecture, defensive transparency, the danger of hollow leadership in systems that require substance. I used the name Cypher Echo. No identity, no ego, just code, insight, and caution. The first article got 40 views. The second got picked up by a university course. The third was cited in a white paper on system resilience. I wasn't rebuilding my career, I was rebuilding language, the vocabulary, for people who knew that sometimes the system fails because the people inside it want to hear yes, not truth. Then came the podcast. Digital Conscience, a small show, not flashy, but sharp. They did a full episode titled The Lisa Question. They didn't say I was innocent. They didn't say I was guilty. They simply asked, what happens when the one person who says this is a bad idea gets fired, and then it happens exactly as they said? What's the cost of ignoring integrity because it doesn't fit your timeline? What kind of industry are we building if we punish caution and reward complicity? They didn't mention my name again after the intro, but the questions lingered in the minds of listeners, in conference panels, in Slack messages between engineers who remembered me, who remembered the silence that followed. One day, I received a package. No name, no return address. Inside, a hard copy of the article from the blog. Highlighted sections, a handwritten note tucked in the pages. Ellie tried to delete the code, but the code remembers. Thank you. Still listening. I cried. Not out of sadness, but because it meant I hadn't disappeared. Not really. I had just gone quiet long enough to be heard differently. Skyline never apologized. No executive call to confess. No board member posted a retraction. The industry never welcomed me back. But their silence began to resemble fear. They stopped talking about me, not because I was irrelevant, but because my name had become radioactive, too dangerous to touch, too correct to dismiss. I didn't need revenge. The system I built had done its job in the end. Not by protecting the company, but by exposing the truth that lives inside every system. Integrity, once ignored, will always find a way to surface. And this time, it had. Through people, through memory, through code, through me. It didn't happen all at once. Skyline's fall was slow, almost polite in the beginning. Like a glass tipping off a table in slow motion, you can see the moment just before the shatter, when it could still be caught, still be saved. But no one reached out. First came the lawsuits. Customers, hundreds of them, then thousands. Class actions from data breach victims alleging negligence, inadequate oversight, and a breach of fiduciary duty. Some of the plaintiffs were high-net-worth individuals with reputations to protect. That made headlines. Then came the partners. Institutional investors quietly began pulling out. Firms who once cited Skyline as a model of modern finance began scrubbing references from their press kits. Several high-profile fintech collaborations collapsed overnight. Behind closed doors, the boardroom turned inward. I heard from someone, one of my old compliance contacts, that the CEO was under internal investigation, not for the breach itself, but for greenlighting the outsourcing deal without full transparency. Apparently, the contract was rushed through without a complete third-party audit. Worse, the vendor Skyline hired had previously been fined for improper data handling in Europe. That detail had been buried. Until it wasn't. The markets responded with cold efficiency. Skyline stock began to fall, then plummet, from $58.00 a share to $22.00 in a month, then $14.00. They tried to stop the bleeding, hiring PR firms, launching customer confidence campaigns, restructuring leadership. None of it mattered. Confidence isn't a product, it's a contract, and they had already broken it. Internally, the company turned against itself. Employees leaked screenshots of Slack arguments, emails from executives passing blame, directives contradicting one another. Morale nosedived, resignation spiked. A new CIO was brought in, technically the third one since me. He lasted 6 weeks before stepping down for personal reasons. Some of my former team members reached out, not to ask for help, but to say sorry. "I should have spoken up," one wrote. "They used your silence as a shield for their mistakes," said another. "I see that now, we all do." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. One morning, I woke up to a clip from a live finance hearing. A congresswoman held up a printed email, one of mine, apparently, warning of the exact vector that had been exploited in the breach. She read the subject line aloud. "Security consequences of disabling adaptive protocols, internal use only." Then she looked directly at the CEO sitting before her and said, "This was written by your former CIO 6 months before the incident. Can you explain why her warnings were ignored?" He stammered, fumbled, said he didn't recall the email. The internet remembered. A week later, another news item broke. Skyline was banned from bidding on several federal digital infrastructure contracts. The reason? Unresolved trust and security deficiencies. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reputation. In the tech world, that's the only currency that doesn't depreciate gradually. It disappears all at once. And me? I watched it all from a cabin in the woods, miles away from the buildings I used to run, from the city that once needed my ID badge to function. No schadenfreude, no sense of triumph. Just clarity. They hadn't just dismantled the system. They had dismantled themselves, one compromise, one ignored voice, one silenced objection at a time. Their collapse wasn't a tragedy. It was a process, a logical consequence to an ethical failure. I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves when they decided they could trade principle for expediency and get away with it. The truth? I wasn't the firewall. I was the warning. And when they shut me out, they didn't just lose a person. They lost the last line of protection they didn't even know they needed. I never went back. Not to the city, not to the industry, not to the life that defined me for almost 2 decades. After Skyline, I bought a cabin in a quiet part of Oregon. No neighbors in sight, no buzzing devices, just woods, wind, and the rare clarity of an empty schedule. People kept asking, well, not people exactly, recruiters, journalists, ex-colleagues. They wanted to know what I'd do next. Would I fight? Would I start a company? Write a book? Speak out? Didn't answer. Because I didn't know. The silence once forced upon me had become a kind of shelter. I didn't miss the servers, the dashboards, or even the data. But I missed something else. Purpose. So I built a new system. One without firewalls, KPIs, or it started small, an online class on cybersecurity ethics, free to join. Just a handful of students at first. Kids from community colleges, refugees from the boot camp circuit, engineers laid off from startups that moved too fast and broke too many things. I taught them about architecture, yes, but I also taught them how not to lie to themselves, how to write code that didn't betray the user, how to speak up when silence seemed easier. I didn't use my real name. They knew me only as Instructor LM. And that was enough. Then came the blog. I called it Silent Firewall, an ironic name maybe, or maybe just honest. I wrote anonymously about trust systems, design philosophy, and the dangers of moral compromise in tech leadership. I never mentioned Skyline, never named names, but people read between the lines. To my surprise, the blog grew. Some of my essays were translated into other languages, cited in workshops, shared in corporate ethics training. One day, a student messaged me privately. Your writing helped me turn down a job where they wanted me to ignore user consent protocols. I knew what that would have cost, because of you. That message meant more than any job title I ever held. Occasionally, someone recognized me. A sharp student would connect the dots. An old colleague would quietly send an email. Is Silent Firewall you? I never confirmed. Not because I was hiding, but because it didn't matter. The story was no longer about me. It was about what I stood for. What I still stand for. One day during a live Q&A, a student asked, "Weren't you the one from Skyline?" I paused. The chat went still. Then I smiled. Not sadly, not proudly. Just evenly. And said, "That depends. Are you asking who I was or who I chose to become?" They never asked again. But they kept listening. People still ask why I never spoke up. Why I let them say I sabotaged the system. Why I didn't go public with proof. Why I vanished instead of fighting. I suppose they want a dramatic ending, justice, redemption, applause. But that's not how real stories work. Sometimes, the truth doesn't roar. It waits. And when it finally arrives, it doesn't seek revenge. It simply stands there, unbent, undeniable, while everything built on lies begins to crack. I didn't need to defend myself. Because what I left behind, what they tried to erase, wasn't a flaw in the system. It was the system. I wasn't the glitch. I was the integrity they refused to carry forward. And when it failed, my absence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. Do I regret staying silent? No. Because in that silence, I found something stronger than vindication. I found clarity. I found peace. But if you ask me whether I paid a price, yeah, the price of silence is high. You don't lose the war. You lose the right to be remembered as part of the victory. And sometimes, that's a deeper loss than defeat. So if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need to prove your value to those who only recognize it in your absence. But know this. The cost of not being heard is sometimes your entire legacy.